Aloha guys, this is Dr. Tom coming at you from the Hawaiian Islands. We're going to continue our fascinating discussion today of Adventures in Consciousness, Lesson 4. We've covered quite a bit of ground. We've got some more good stuff to cover today. Okay, the beat goes on. Let's cut through the BS and get down to what we're trying to say. Okay, consciousness, the hard problem. Here's how we're going to proceed. Consciousness is fundamental to everything. Panpsychism or idealism or maybe even neutral monism are closer to the truth than NCC's neural correlates of consciousness. Consciousness can and does exist independently of the brain and the body and is somehow associated with what we term mind. This was understood by the ancients and is being rediscovered in recent times. How's that, guys, for cutting to the chase? Non-duality. Everything is in, we talked about duality, Cartesian, René Descartes, and mind matter. But a lot of people now are leaning towards non-duality. Of course, yours truly is one of them. Everything is an undefined primordial energy, zero-point energy, dark energy, quantum fields, cosmological constant, or the force from which particles manifest when they are observed. This requires consciousness. Since everything is this mysterious energy, everything is interconnected. Since interconnected, entangled in some undefined way. This explains the phenomena of healing, psychic phenomena, synchronicity, a host of unusual events that appear outside of space and time. Everything is one. It's time to examine further evidence of this. Now, it goes without saying that I'm a non-dualist myself. And this is what I think, guys, and I think we've laid a little groundwork to support this, at least to a degree. This is my hero, Dr. Dean Rayden, one of the finest parapsychological researchers on Earth. Most of what we're going to discuss is from Dean Rayden, PhD, who can be found in some of his material Ions. Ions is the Institute for Noetic Studies. I'm missing something. Institute of Noetic Studies, which was founded by Edgar Mitchell, the famous astronaut, sixth man to walk in the moon. Dr. Mitchell was a very spiritually inclined gentleman. He had a history of studying psychic phenomena. He had some spiritual things happen to him during his voyage to the moon, etc. Something that Dean comments on occasionally is the current state of academia. Everything is highly specialized, much like medicine. Doctoral students become intensely focused in their area, but are lacking in other disciplines. This is not necessarily a good thing. When we combine this with the obsession with mathematical beauty, which I mentioned before, we might well end up with scientists, physicians, and researchers who have difficulty putting it all together. Fortunately, the founders of quantum mechanics did not suffer from this limitation. All right, here we go. Here they are. Einstein, my hero. Even though Einstein didn't particularly approve of quantum mechanics, he was one of the founders of it. His work pretty much laid a trail right to it. Who else we got? Werner Heisenberg, and some of the other ones Dirac, I don't recognize. I should. When we look back on the thoughts of the founders of quantum mechanics from a modern perspective, it's shocking. In modern times, if a scientist starts talking too much about spirituality or religious ideas, or the importance of consciousness even, they can end up in trouble. Science controls their flock by funding and by tenure for professorships. There's a lot of competition, particularly now when tenured professorships are being cut right and left at many universities. It's a tragedy and a topic for another day. Quantum founders made statements that would almost be taken as heresy today. Of course, many are Nobel laureates, and their reputations were secure, as it should be. Now, I might be there is freedom of speech and things like that, but they meaning orthodox science, guys, definitely controls people by funding, by money. Cut their funding off if they venture into something they don't approve of. And believe me, spiritual stuff, consciousness studies, probably to a lesser degree, psychic phenomena, oh my God, are big time taboo. Now, once you're already tenured, you're caught doing some heinous act, you're okay. But for the people that are wanting to get tenured positions. And there's great competition for them. Oh, yeah, they better toe the line. Don't even dream of doing a study on psychokinesis or energy healing or something like that. Okay, this is the great quantum founder Max Planck. Here's an amazing comment from the great Max Planck, who coined the term quanta. I regard consciousness as fundamental. I regard matter as a derivative of consciousness. Now let me lay that truth on you again. I regard consciousness as fundamental. I regard matter as a derivative of consciousness. All matter originates and exists by virtue of a force which brings the particles of the atom to vibration. The roiling, seething quantum energy fields, dark matter. We must assume behind this force the existence of a consciousness, of a conscious, as you were, as they say, U.S. Army, the existence of a conscious and intelligent mind. This mind is the matrix of all matter. You guys, this is heavy stuff. And we're going to see this is just one of several. Max Planck won the Nobel Prize in Physics in 1918 for his discovery of energy quanta, that energy was radiated in fixed, discrete amounts. He was a theoretical physicist and is considered the originator of quantum theory. Erwin Schrödinger, famous for his cat. Erwin Schrödinger, another founder of quantum mechanics and famous for his box and Schrödinger's cat, made this extraordinary statement. Consciousness cannot be accounted for in physical terms, for consciousness is absolutely fundamental. Let me lay that on you again. Consciousness cannot be accounted for in physical terms, for consciousness is absolutely fundamental. Schrödinger was a major developer for quantum mechanics and won the Nobel Prize in Physics in 1933 for the Schrödinger equation, which allowed the development of the wave function of his system. He also worked on Einstein's relativity and theoretical biology, particularly genetics. Now, his cat's famous, and you see this poster, see Wanted Dead and Alive, Schrödinger's cat. It was a thought puzzle that he invented that had to do with the Copenhagen interpretation of quantum mechanics. In other words, does something exist if it's not being observed or watched in some manner? Schrödinger's cat, a thought experiment sometimes described as a paradox, devised by Austrian-Irish physicist Erwin Schrödinger in 1935 during the course of discussions with Albert Einstein. Now remember, Einstein talked to his pal about, do you really think the moon is not there when you're not looking at it? It illustrates what we saw as the problem of Copenhagen interpretation of quantum mechanics. This scenario presents a hypothetical cat that may be simultaneously both alive and dead, a state known as quantum superposition, as a result of being linked to a random subatomic event that may or may not occur. It had to do, if you open the box, they had, I think it was cyanide gas, and it might open and it might not. Here's what Schrödinger said. The total number of minds in the universe is one. Pretty heavy. In fact, consciousness is a singularity phasing within all beings. Now, guys, these guys are the royalty of science. The absolute, if they had a Mount Rushmore of scientists, these guys would have their busts, their heads up there. So if you don't know this already, these are big-time, all-time superstars. Another one was Sir Isaac Newton. Newton wrote over 1 million words on spiritual and paranormal and alchemy topics. He spent more time studying alchemy than he did physics and gravitation. Why? Because these guys knew what was going on. They were geniuses. And I think it was more acceptable at that time to be versed in philosophy and other things to try to give meaning to all this stuff. You know, we can work out the mathematical equations, but we have to be able to fit pieces of the puzzle into the real world. You know? The total number of minds in the universe is one. In fact, consciousness is a singularity phasing within all beings. Here's another founder, and more a bit later. There were several groups of them. The ones we've spoken of so far were the original. Eugene Vigner come along a little bit later. He was a group of later innovators of quantum mechanics. He stated, the very study of the physical world leads to the conclusion that the concept of consciousness, excuse me, is an ultimate reality. Let's hit you with that again. The very study of the physical world leads to the conclusion that the concept of consciousness is an ultimate reality. Vigner won the Nobel Prize for Physics in 1963. His contributions theory of the atomic nucleus and the elementary particles, particularly through the discovery and application of fundamental symmetry principles. Vigner developed a great deal of mathematical aspects of quantum mechanics. So he's not as well known to the general public as Max Planck and Schrödinger and Niels Bohr and, of course, the great Einstein. Speaking of the great Einstein, check these out, man. The intellect has little to do on the road to discovery. The intellect has little to do on the road to discovery. There comes a leap in consciousness, call it intuition or what you will. The solution comes to you and you don't know how or why. A lot of great things like this, guys, were discovered like that. They just pop into their head. Einstein spoke with that quite a bit. Here's another interesting quote from the great one. A person experiences life as something separated from the rest, a kind of optical delusion of consciousness. Our task must be to free ourselves from this self-imposed prison and through compassion to find the reality of oneness. Oneness with a capital O. Pretty heavy, man, coming from these hardcore, brilliant scientists. Of course, Einstein got the Nobel Prize in 1922 for his examination of the photoelectric effect. He never received a Nobel Prize, or not. I think he had to be nominated 8 times to get the one he got, I believe. Never got one for the special theory of relativity, nor the general theory, nor his other incredible contributions. Okay, in 1915, Albert Einstein, already famous among scientists, unknown to the general public. They were searching for a way to prove one of the predictions he made in general relativity about light being bent in a gravitational field. And what it was, we know where the stars are around the sun at a certain time, but yet we can't see them because the light from the sun blocks it out. So during a total solar eclipse, we could measure those stars and see if Einstein was correct. Well, this in itself is a really fascinating story, because World War I was raging, and some of these people, these eclipses don't occur just like everywhere, and some of them were in enemy, in war zones, and some people almost got seriously hurt. However, Sir Arthur Eddington, after Einstein published his groundbreaking special theory of relativity in 1905 and his incredible general theory of relativity in 1915, he was famous in physics but unknown to the public. Einstein predicted the light rays would bend as they passed into the sun to our telescopes. Eddington proved that in a solar eclipse of that year. Einstein was correct, and Eddington made him a superstar. Overnight, Einstein, I remember the London Times had some amazing scientist changes. I forget the headlines are really mind-boggling and really impressive. Almost like Elvis was having a big concert there or something. Here's what Eddington said about what we're talking about. It is difficult for the matter-of-fact physicist to accept the view that the substratum of everything is of mental character. Again, let me hit you with that a second time. It is difficult for the matter-of-fact physicist to accept the view that the substratum of everything is of mental character. He later wrote a successful book on relativity. Einstein said it was the finest presentation of the subject in any language. Now, he was primarily an astronomer, but he also was a physicist, mathematician. Okay, we're running out of time. When we pick back up, we'll talk about Dr. John von Neumann. That's how you pronounce that. Another one. So guys, what are we trying to do here? Show that these great scientists knew what they were talking about, and we certainly think so as science. They also thought consciousness was supreme. Be here next time. Dr. Tom signing off.